network of lens rentals, distributors, and cinematographers. So when a rental or a distributor joins the network, their lens catalog is uploaded to the app, it's uploaded to the web, and individual users receive a push notification introducing the cinematographers to the rental or the distributor. That rental or distributor is then featured on our social media accounts, introducing them to the network. We offer different subscription packs because no two rentals or distributors are alike. This way, rental and distributor subscribers can choose the option that best fits their needs, the most inexpensive of which is only 100 euros per year. You just download the app for free on Apple or Android, go to the new rentals dealers page and click subscribe. We take it from there. And it's truly that easy and the best decision you can make right now because it's going to give you that international outreach and visibility you need. Now, there is more to CineLenses than just our database and our network. There's actually much more to it. Alvaro, as someone in this industry, always liked the idea of being able to see examples of the work that different lenses produced. This led to the addition of the CineLenses forum, classified by lens, where users can add links to the projects they've used their lenses on. We then took it a step further. There's a lot of secretiveness about which lenses are used in different films, but curious minds want to know. So we needed a credit section, which is linked to IMDb so that a CineLenses app user can search a film title and see or add the lenses used in it. So for example, if we want to see what lenses were used in The Truman Show, we go to the credits section, we search the movie title, and we can see the lenses added if they were, and if they haven't, we have the option to add them ourselves. So that's the credit section, but we didn't stop there. Nick Sadler, the creator of the apps, Artemis Director, and Helios, recommended adding lens serial numbers so that users could see who the owners of the lenses are. Because you don't want to rent just any Cook S4. You want to rent the Cook S4 that Pedro Almodóvar and DP José Luis Alcán used in Pain and Glory. So on CineLenses app, you can look that up and see who owns this lens and where you can get it. More recently, we've added a camera coverage search option where you can choose the camera you'll be filming with and the sensor. The app will then let you know what lenses can be used with that sensor. So in our database of 3,300 lenses, 2,000 of them have been classified by coverage. And then last year at IBC in Amsterdam, way back before COVID, when we could actually attend events in person, CineLenses met with Tom J. Smith of Dynamic Rentals. And Tom thought the app really needed a secondhand buy and sell option. From there came our marketplace, which will be upgraded in January 2021 to make it even more user-friendly, and in the meantime can still be used to rent or sell cameras and CineLenses. And I mention these names, Tom J. Smith, Nick Sadler, to highlight the fact that CineLenses was made by an industry professional for industry professionals. That CineLenses provides cinematographers, rentals, and distributors with concrete benefits. Can everyone still hear me? With concrete benefits. So in keeping with our value proposal at CineLenses, we're always looking for ways to better serve our clients. So we would also love to know what, if anything, is still missing from the app, what you'd like to see that you didn't see today. And that's really what brought us to the Virtual Lens Summit. We'd love to know if you have an idea or a question you'd like to mention now. I'd love to hear from you so I can take those ideas and questions back to our team. And if not now and those ideas come to you later, please do feel free to contact us over LinkedIn or email, because we really would love feedback on how to improve our app. So if anyone has any questions, please do let me know. And I will stop sharing my screen so you can look at me instead of the PowerPoint. There we go. Are there any questions or things I can clarify about CineLenses? I see one in the chat. So how do I add myself as a lens rental facility? So all you have to do is you go on our website. You can go to the lens rental or dealers page. In your case, that would be the rentals page. And you just scroll down, you can see the different pack options there and choose which one works best for you. And if you have questions about adapting any of those packs to your specific needs, you can also reach out over email about that. And then you just hit subscribe. And in terms of using the app itself, that is free. And then when listing lenses from rental houses, you list the different options on those lenses, like uncoated options or different mounts. Okay, so I am going to check with Alvaro on that specific question, because generally what we do, the process is when you register as a rental or a dealer, as a distributor, we upload your catalog. So whatever you give us, whatever PDF of your catalog is what is uploaded. And then you can see on the page what that looks like and get a better sense of how our lenses are classified and cataloged.
Hi, Madison, I had a question. Who puts in the description of the lenses when somebody might say it's contrasty in the description, or warm or cold, or, you know, flary? Is that the manufacturer, or do you guys come up with that?
You mean the comments or just the specific descriptions of the lenses?
The description.
The description. So if any of that is included in the catalog, in your specific catalog that we've gotten from your webpage or received from you, we'll put it in. Otherwise, I believe Alvaro fills in a lot of that information, given that he's the expert and knows these lenses firsthand.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Does anyone else have another question? Well, if not, I will send the CineLenses LinkedIn and email in the chat. So anyone, please feel free to reach out at a later date. And in the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to Logan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, Madison. Ginger, I tried to send you that file, and for some reason, it doesn't like us. So we'll use the one I sent you last night.
That one, ready?
If you don't mind.
Yep.
So before we do that, hi, I'm Logan Schneider. I'm a DP based in Los Angeles. Though I love to pretend I'm still in Montana, as you can see behind me. And Madison asked me to come and talk about a couple different perspectives on lenses, beginning with as a DP, my former career as an AC, and then I accidentally own a small boutique rental house in Los Angeles that, you know, trying to get one more thing and one more thing, and suddenly it's a full rental house. So I have that kind of mixed perspective, and each of those
former students want me to attend.
Each of those has a different idea of what's important with lenses, and the important factor I find is looking for where those needs converge. What are the important points where everyone can work together, and then where do they each have to have each other's backs? So Gendra, are you able to share?
Yes, let me figure out share screen.
Thank you.
Ready for that?
Yes. Okay. So I put together this little slideshow just to take us through, and here's a shot there. The later version that wouldn't upload had a shot from a Sony Venice with a K35 from the 70s, next to this shot, which is a 40mm signature prime on a mini LF. And just as an example that we've got 100 years of lenses that are all valid, and creatively, we're just starting to see what's possible with lenses. So if you flip to the next page, I just want to start with the DP perspective. So when you're DP, the most important thing is the story. You read the script, talk to the director, you get a sense of what is right for what you're doing, whether it be a movie, a commercial, a TV show, a documentary. I always start from that point in regards to all aspects of cinematography, but lenses included. And I think if you get too technical too early, it's a disservice. So the next step to me is, after I've kind of understood what we're trying to accomplish, what's the feel, then I start to think about what's the texture of a lens. Is it spherical? Is it anamorphic? Is it old? Is it soft? Is it sharp? Is it like, what is the feel of the lens that's right for these characters? And then next is like, what do I need to do with these lenses? Do I need to be able to put this on Steadicam? I can't put a master zoom on a Steadicam. You know, what do we have to accomplish physically, and how did this, and will that make these lenses not possible? So if you look on the right here, the top and bottom shot are from Drunk History. The top is CineLenses with a really deep LUT and kind of a antique suede filter. And the middle one is Hintified, where we shot Cook anamorphics on full-size LFs, because that was the only way we could shoot LF at the time. The Mini wasn't out yet. So, and then it became, what can we accomplish with that big of a rig? A 65 mil Cook anamorphic with an expander on a full-size LF. You have to make a decision on how mobile you can become, and it mixed with story and texture. And so we made that decision for that job, but it's not right for everything. So there's no point going way down the road in one aspect without being realistic about the physical constraints or the time constraints. Involved in that is number 4, which is the T-stop, speed. If I rarely need a 1.3, but sometimes you do. Sometimes you're shooting a car commercial, available light at night downtown, and you need every little bit it's going to give you. Sometimes you want to isolate people. One of my favorite parts of the large format world is in a wide shot, you can pop someone out of the background, put it at a 1.8. You know, it can be a financial issue, twice the lights for one more stop. And sometimes it's worth paying for the faster lens. I think skin tones is an absolutely fundamental need of a lens, and I see a lot of them fail in that context. So I pay really close attention to that. And I also I do testing to really understand where those, what works for me, obviously, you know, for the story and for my personal taste. And one thing that I don't think gets talked enough about in terms of LUTs, or in terms of workflow and lenses, is how it fits into the entire image pipeline. Because you're baking in parts of the look with filters in front of the lens itself, which sensor you're using, how you're processing that, what the lookup table is, how it's colored in the end, so it's the whole pipeline is critical. And if you're testing a lens without testing the pipeline, you're guessing, and you don't have control of your image. So, for example, the Summilux on top here is a very open lens. So if I didn't have a really steep LUT, then this would be a much flatter image. If I wasn't shooting this at a 2.8, it would appear much sharper. So the 2.8 rolls off. There's a little bit of grain put in post to mellow it out. All these steps are integrated into that lens choice. And if I separate the lens from the pipeline, it doesn't serve the story, obviously the most important piece. So, and I can go on and on about that if anyone has questions.
Yeah, Logan, I'd like to say you bring up a point about the right lens for the right job, obviously. And that's what I've always said, being the owner of a rental house for many years, is, owner operators get all this gear, they get their lens, they get their camera, and then they get pigeonholed being that person that can provide that item, and that's it. Very limited, very, very limited on tools. Sure, you can go do your interview, but you cannot faithfully create art, which you are doing and directors of photography do with hundreds of lens choices.
Totally. And also it's some jobs, going back to flexibility, camera movement, if you need a lot of zoom range and a handheld setup, that's a limited amount of lenses. And if you want an anamorphic vintage feeling that actually functions, that's a limited amount of lenses. So there are advantages to owning gear in that you can kind of put a little extra gas into certain projects that you couldn't take further. Sometimes it's financially beneficial, sometimes it's not. That's a whole endless battle. There's so many lenses coming out right now that I tell people, if they want to make money, put your money in index stocks. If you want to own gear, then hopefully it has a second benefit of that. But I find it can be very beneficial to especially in documentaries or low budget projects, to be able to put that extra gas on. One thing I wanted to mention also in terms of right choice is focal range. So you can have the best set of lenses in the world, the most beautiful 3 anamorphics, but if that director wants a 60 mil close focus because he's been watching J.J. Abrams movies, then if you don't have that in your set, then it's the wrong set. If you're not looking at what the director's intentions and choices, then focal range can be really important. I've always liked Master Primes and S4s and these newer sets, Supreme Signatures. All of them have now kind of learned from this, of having enough lenses that a 28 is not a 32, is not a 24, and respecting those differences. Some people are nitpicky about it, some are not, but I like the option, and I like that DPs have that option, and directors. Even to the point where Cook made a 25 and a 27 because all the Panavision people wanted that 27. Flare gets talked about a lot because you can see it easily, but for narrative work, sometimes it's great, sometimes it's a problem. So I put it's an important aspect of a lens, but I think it's overstated in a lot of ways. I find it's more important when you have less control. Music videos, low budget commercials, you need some sort of magic, and it's not in front of the lens on its own, then flare becomes helpful. But I don't put it at the top of my, if I can't control it and the lens is crazy all the time, then it's higher up on the list. But if it's just another characteristic, it's not as much of a priority. Consistency through the lenses, obviously not as important as it once was in the photochemical days. I remember talking to Eric Brown, and he was saying that they used to have like minor Ratten gels that lived with each lens, so they could correct each lens every time they put it on, so that they would kind of match. And those days, fortunately, are behind us. But having lenses that all feel the same, so focal lengths aren't huge changes, is an important factor, especially in narrative. I really try not to get in the way of the story, and I feel like big jumps in a look, if not justified, can be really debilitating. And then lastly, it's important to look cool in the behind the scenes. So obviously bigger, cooler, newer lenses look cool at it. Still trying to figure that one out. we could go to the camera assistant's perspective. And if anyone has any more questions, please chime in. I can't see them very well, so Mike, if you can relay them, it would be super helpful. All right, so the AC's perspective is a technician's perspective primarily. I find that many of the best ACs have aesthetic taste that I really appreciate being around. But when you're looking at lenses, it's really about functionality. It's that saying of no one knows who a focus puller is until something goes wrong. And it's important to give them the tools that they are not compromised, so they can do their job, so you can focus, no pun intended, on the story. Functionality can mean all the front elements are the same, so it's fast. It can mean the motors won't impact the mechanism. Like newer housings are designed for motors, they don't get damaged. Older housings can be tweaked. And rehousing is a big part of that for old lenses and keeping them functional in the modern way of focus pulling with monitors and remote focus. All the mounts should be strong. If they're all the same length, that can matter. I think it matters less than some manufacturers would like it to. I think I would rather have a better lens than them all be the same. But making it all work in the system is really key. And so reliability, knowing that you can go out one day, it's going to be the same focus, the marks are going to match. This is what matters as an AC, and consistency. You want to take out as many variables as possible. And a lot of times, great lenses can compromise your shoot, and they can compromise performance, and they can compromise speed because they don't work for the AC. So I think it's really important that for a DP to consider that, and for an AC to communicate that to a DP if they feel like there's going to be an issue before they get to set. System integration, the clip on that box, the motors, the lens mounts, whether you need LDS for post, that's all important, and it depends. It's very job to job on what matters. Sharpness obviously matters. There's some really difficult lenses for focus, and there's some that give you a little bit of help, and it kind of depends on what format you're shooting. But a master prime is just harder to focus than an ultra prime, and it always will be. Same with an S4, Leicas, etc. So I think as an AC, knowing what you're in for, being realistic, when you need the light ranger, when you need your sniper, focus bug, whatever it is. And Hintified, we were shooting large format, anamorphic, big Steadicam moves, long lens work. Ian Barbella, the AC, was on top of it, realistic, let me know when he needed something. And prep and figuring that out ahead of time was really key to us being on the same page. And next, backup availability, because things happen on set. When a lens is damaged, if you have a one-of-a-kind lens and you need that lens and it gets damaged, what's the backup plan? This is, if you've got one of there used to be 3 C-series 60mm Panavision anamorphics that had a closer focus than all the other ones. And so those were the Michael Bay, the J.J. Abrams type lenses that no one else got. But if one of those got destroyed, there's no backup and you have to change your shot. So understanding what your other plans are if there's an older lens is really important. And then also having for modern lenses, it's one of the best parts. If your 27 master prime gets damaged, you can have a new one 2 hours later on set, and that's makes it not about you, which is the best thing when you're in AC. Again, looking cool in the behind the scenes, usually some sort of patches everywhere, hopefully an English stick slate in front, and minor concerns in some ways, but also it keeps us going in weird times. And finally, the rental house perspective. Everyone does this differently, and I don't know that one way's right. I only know how I do it in the houses that I see and respect, and we don't all agree. So partly because I am a DP and was an AC, to me, the most important thing is, are they good lenses? Do I feel like they are special and have something to offer and can do great work? And I believe in them. And if we believe in them and like them, they tend to do well. And I'm usually not alone in my choice of what lenses we believe in, because we're all kind of guessing. I can't believe how many lenses have come out in the last 5 years. It's impossible to keep up with all of them. Some of them are really available, some of them are not. It's fairly overwhelming. So kind of going with your gut about what you think is a good lens is a good way to not chase minor shifts. Secondly, obviously, if there's demand and popularity, we start to see that people want this lens. We have to consider it. And sometimes it's not the lens that I like the best, and that's fine because it's not all about me. So we will make a choice based on what people are asking. And obviously that comes down to cost. If everyone's asking for, I don't know, full frame anamorphics a week after they come out, with no idea if more are coming out or what's going to happen, you know, that's a lot of money to outlay ahead of time. And so understanding that rental houses are making these choices at a much faster pace than they've ever had to make is important to the kind of relationship between DPs and ACs and rental houses, because everyone's trying really hard, and this is, even without COVID, this is just a crazy time. Like, the explosion of the equipment industry is really challenging to keep up with as a on set, but also as a rental house to be able to support that. Because if you want 4 sets of lenses that didn't exist a year ago, that's a huge outlay without having proven themselves. The next thing I think is important is, what's the maintenance? How many hours? Does it have to get sent back a lot? Do I need to rehouse these lenses so that I don't have so much maintenance? We used to have a ton of maintenance on the Summilux, and then we realized that if you lay them sideways instead of vertically, you have half the maintenance in the case. It's minor things like that can be $5,000-$10,000 a year for a set of lenses, and you really have to kind of think about whether that's worth owning it, and is it going to cover all that. Next, is this for the time horizon, is this going to cover a gap? You know, there's a certain amount of large format lenses right now that came out first, which no one really loves, but they're first. And and I'm not going to name any names, obviously, and there's some good ones and some ones I don't like, but it's, you know, are you going to invest in a small gap piece of gear? And is that, those are hard choices to make. Are they going to cover the new format? What am I going to do with it once the better version comes out? These are really difficult times in a competitive environment. System integration, how does it work with the whole camera? There may be the best lens in the world with some crazy mount, but if you don't have a bunch of cameras with that mount, who cares? It doesn't work. So that's important. We had market saturation. We had one of the first sets of CineLenses, and it went crazy, and it was fantastic. If you bought them now, it would be a lot harder to pay them off. And if there's a bunch of gear available, you can get a better subrental deal, and then it's not worth owning. It's better just to subrent it and own something else. Certain manufacturers have history. Before we bought the master builds, I was really concerned about a new company. How is this going to be here in 8 years when I need a new rear element? Like, if something goes wrong, who's buying these lenses? It hasn't been 100 years like Arri. Can I trust that they will still be there? That's an important factor for me, because I don't want to be caught holding something I can't rent or sell. And we've had old lenses that no one knows about that are amazing, that are like still my secret lenses. I've got a couple little bits and bobs, but if people don't know about them, they won't ask for them, they won't rent them. I'm kind of disappointed by the amount of DPs that don't want to test new things. They kind of just go with, I heard this was shot on this. So I think going out and testing is really important, which takes us to the next page, which is that this is all kind of exhausting. There's so many important factors here, and I can't say enough that testing is the thing that clarifies for me. And testing a lot, not just all at once, but here and there, so that it becomes like soccer practice, where you just build it a little bit. You don't have to understand all the differences, because you might be looking at one thing one day and then notice something else another day, and they'll slowly build on each other until you create this catalog in your mind. I think testing is the key to understanding lenses from all three perspectives, and obviously using them and seeing where they fail and being realistic about it. I hope some of that's helpful. I'm happy to take any questions, and I hope I wasn't rambling on too much, but I like lenses, so I don't know what to say.
Logan, I'd like to just mention what you were talking about with market saturation and the difficulty of these. There's so many like unicorn type lenses that we're looking for, and there's 5 in the US or 10 in the US, and it's really difficult to purchase these things. People say, do you have this? And I'm like, no, that's not even out yet. And
yeah,
I don't know if we're going to get that, because we don't know how many are going to be purchased and available, internationally even.
Yeah, and if you can't rent it and if you can't repair it in 5 years, then it's not a good investment. Is someone talking muted?
Any other questions?
Hey, Anthony here. I wanted to know, for somebody who's like just venturing off into the world of anamorphics, as a DP and shoots commercials and occasionally music videos, what is another like lens out there that that usually go unlooked at these rental houses?
When you say go unlooked at, like might just be available or just as kind of a lens that doesn't get enough attention?
I would say a lens that doesn't get enough attention.
These kind of come in cycles, I'd say. So a good example to me, and also as a rental house, was you know, 6-7 years ago, whenever the master anamorphics came out, they were amazing and expensive, but they didn't really get going for a while. And partly because people, I think, weren't testing them and seeing where their sweet spot was. I find they need to be a little underexposed to get the best quality. And there's a lot of lenses like that that are fantastic. People just haven't figured out yet. And that's where I think if you go to a rental house and you just play, they are usually supportive of that. And if they're not, then it's probably the wrong rental house. So I go in, think about what your project is, and then do little tests in relation to that. And so see if you can find a secret mix that works. I mean, there's a lot of different anamorphics out there, but there's very few that are universal in their usefulness. If you want to use master anamorphics, you're not going to be able to match a zoom to those. And if you can't match a zoom to those, that's a huge restriction. But if you don't, they're totally unique in their clarity and resolution. I like that the Cooke anamorphics have a matching front element zoom. Panavision has matching front element zooms, and so does Hawk, but a lot of sets don't. So going in, playing, I mean, the Cooke anamorphic zoom on its own can shoot a whole movie. It's amazing, and I don't know how busy they are. So it's a hard question to answer, but it really comes down to just start plugging away on the shelves of your favorite rental house and see what's there.
Thank you. And one last question. I want to know, like, what are some things that a DP can do to create that relationship with rental houses in which we can like try out lenses, you know, even in between productions?
Loyalty, I think, is the biggest thing. If you want to take stuff out on your small jobs and do be really supported and have more than the budget might handle and push your work, just come back with the paying jobs and show that you're interested, show that you take care of the gear, and a rental house will notice that. And it's doesn't have to be complicated. It's kind of just how you would treat your friend, and if you're borrowing their lawnmower, you know, bring them a 6-pack. It's a team sport, and we're all trying to build each other's careers. So it's if you're supportive, they'll be supportive. And again, if they're not, then you're probably at the wrong rental house.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Makes perfect sense.
So should I jump in, or I'm not the host, so
Yeah.
I invited to talk. I don't know. You all set, Logan?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks, Madison. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Ginger.
Should I go next?
Thank you.
Go for it. And we can do a little Q&A after. So anyone that has questions that come up along the way.
Cool. Well, thank you for inviting me here to be one of the DP guests. I was actually kind of surprised to be invited, since I don't really consider myself a lens nerd the way that some of my colleagues are. And maybe, and as I was talking to Madison, she said, you know, that's kind of what they found interesting about me, is how I had a very different background and career trajectory. So I went to NYU film school in the early to mid 90s. I see some of my classmates on the call here today. And back when I was in film school, it was all just, we shot 16 millimeter, not even Super 16. And there was no digital video yet. There was no HD yet. And we didn't really learn much about lenses because there wasn't really many lenses to learn about. It's like this school had an Ingenue 12 to 120 zoom, which everyone hated and called it shit. And, you know, people wanted to rent Zeiss super speeds. So it was sort of just like, oh, Zeiss lenses are good. The lens that the school has is bad. And that was kind of like, if you had a budget, you would rent Zeiss. And that was kind of all that I learned at the film school level back in the early 90s. So it was like, once digital cinema evolved and a lot of people started shooting on red and single sensor, you know, not just like the 3 CCD, you know, digital stuff that came before the red, like like the Genesis and the F23 and the F35, you know, that once we started shooting on single sensor cameras and basically the digital revolution, a lot of people started to find that a lot of the content, a lot of the movies being made all looked very similar. And so the reach for more distinctive lenses, for more obscure lenses, for vintage lenses became a way for people to put a stamp, something more unique and expressive on their work. And people started getting more interested in lenses that had been long forgotten, that had been disregarded, that people thought were not good because they were soft, they had flaws and aberrations. And then we kind of came to look at these as having character and taste and style. And that's when I started to become more interested in lenses. So I had been a gaffer and an electrician working my way up until I had a strong enough reel to get hired, you know, to work, to get paid to be a DP. And I had not been a camera assistant. And so I did not get much exposure to lenses. And, you know, I had a strong lighting background. I had a strong crew background. I worked on Sex and the City and Law and Order in the electric department. And then I came into the digital cinema world where I worked at Red Digital Cinema's original NAB trade show booth in 2006, the year that they were announced, where, you know, everyone was calling it vaporware. I mean, technically they were right at the time. And then I became known as this digital cinema pioneer, this digital cinema expert. And so once people were seeking me out for my knowledge and expertise in that arena, I was like, oh, okay, I need to keep on top of this stuff. So I was testing every new camera that came along. I was doing all these interviews and blogs and international appearances to talk and master classes and all this stuff. And so after a while, I got bored of all of the nerdy, technical, math, science side of it. And I was like, I didn't get into this industry to become a technologist. Like, I want to be an artist. And so lenses were the sort of the new frontier for me to begin to that I kind of knew the least about compared to all the other aspects that go into being a cinematographer. So I got really curious about sort of the alchemy, if you will, of optics, of how, you know, you can learn about, you can educate yourself, you can do YouTube videos, you can learn about the concrete side of the technology of filmmaking, but lenses and how different lenses render an image are anything but concrete. There's something you can't explain in words. There's something you can't just study the difference between one lens and another. You have to do your own tests. You have to explore what your tastes are. So that's sort of how I started becoming interested in lenses. I bought a set of Cooke S4s, sort of as an investment, like passive income, basically, in around 2007, I think. And I just keep them at a rental house. They're not necessarily for my own personal use. It was when the Red camera started coming to market, and the lenses that were either available or being introduced at the time with the Red, like that 18-50 Red zoom. You know, I was speaking in Spain, and we went to a rental house there and put that lens up on a projector. And, you know, I was so unimpressed with that lens that I called my husband from Spain and said, we should buy lenses. I wasn't interested in getting into the business model of owning a camera, but I thought that lenses were going to become very in demand all of a sudden as this camera started, this and other cameras started to take hold in the industry, that there would be a shortage of single sensor PL glass. So I own a set of Cooke S4s. I'd say my favorite lenses are Cooke Speed Panchros. I just finished a feature last week where I shot on Speed Panchros. I considered buying a set, you know, as I was looking to find a set to rent for that job. A friend of mine was selling a set. So I actually went to my husband, who's a camera operator at Steadicam, and my business partner. I was like, do you want to buy a set of, you know, rehoused Speed Panchros? And he knows that they're my favorite lenses. We looked at the price. After not working for 6 months during the pandemic, he's like, I don't think it's the right time to make a $65,000 investment right now. So passed on that opportunity. I feel like I want to show my demo reel just for people to get a sense of who I am and the kind of work that I've done. And then I can talk about some recent projects that I've done, which lenses I chose and why. The work it's like a 2.5 minute compilation. The lens choices in there are really all over the place from my body of work. I just remembered, I wanted to make a correction about the way that I was introduced, that the documentary Clean, I was not the director of photography for that. I did additional cinematography for one of the key interviews, but I was not the primary cinematographer on that. So I didn't want to give that impression. So I'm going to show, let's see, where do I do share screen again? So I'm going to show my reel. Mostly for people to get a sense of what kind of work I do, and then also maybe that will inform when we get to question and answer what kinds of projects that people might want to ask about. Okay. So that's a little taste of my body of work, at least the stuff that I have ready to show. I've shot several projects since that are not released yet. Some I can talk about and some I can't. Yeah, I'll start by talking about my most recent feature we wrapped last week. Was a comedy with, it's called The Sixth Reel, and it's written and directed by Charles Bush and Carl Andrus, and starring Charles Bush, as well as an ensemble cast of Broadway stars that are, most of which are in their mid-60s. So they hired me because of my comedy work and because of my reputation for lighting women and beauty lighting. And something I learned on Sex and the City was how to make people look great within a context of an environment that is still true to the storytelling. So unlike just a makeup commercial or hair commercial, which I also do, where someone's just standing there and you're putting the light in the perfect place and it doesn't need to look real or natural. There's a skill to lighting people in a flattering way that is not just completely flat and lacking drama and lacking expression, or doesn't look real, looks too affected or glamorized. So that's what they were looking for this film. And I was interested in testing the new Masterbuilt lenses, but I frankly ran out of time. My prep on this was a little rushed, and I knew that Cooke Speed Panchros were the benchmark under, the default lenses that I was going to choose for this film because of the softness and how flattering they are for faces, but also the tonality, which is, I know, something that Logan mentioned about skin tones. And like, usually when we talk about skin tones, we are thinking about color, like colorists and grading. But I think in the context of lenses, tonality is more about contrast. And, I didn't want lenses that are harsh. I don't want lenses that are so crisp that it is unflattering to facial detail. So I knew that the Speed Panchros were going to be kind to the cast and portraying them in the most flattering way. Prior to that, I did, or actually I should say right after that, I did a commercial that was an aerial acrobat, and we had to light and be prepared to shoot 30 feet into the air down to the ground. So it was basically the stamina of the performers was the primary concern in most of our choices for how we went about shooting it. So we got a Jimmy Jib and we got a zoom. So I was like, I want to be able to pick things off quickly while she's in the air without changing lenses. So for the first time, I used the 24 to 180 Fujinon Premier Zoom, which is close to 20 pounds. And I was concerned about fitting that on the remote head, but I, put a call into my jib operator in advance and found out about the specs. And, unfortunately we couldn't use the Ronin along with the Jimmy Jib because it was too heavy for that, but he had like the older Jimmy Jib head that could take that kind of payload. And then a project that I was doing during prep for the film, which was also during COVID, I shot Michelle Obama's closing argument speech for the Joe Biden campaign. And we only had her for about 45 minutes. And we were shooting on 5 cameras. And we shot FX9s. And I didn't have focus pullers because she was mostly sitting still. So some of it was teleprompter, some of it was a lock off, but others of it were, on a slider. And so I specifically chose the lenses that camera is known to be amazing at, autofocus and face detection, and to utilize that feature of that camera that I chose the new Zeiss E-mount lenses that would fit, not just fit, but had the fastest autofocus response in compatibility with that camera. So the reason I'm going into this kind of detail is like sometimes the choice is an artistic one, a creative choice, and sometimes it's a practical one. That was the reason I chose those lenses for that. And the zoom was the reason that I chose those lenses for that. My prior feature, which I'm not allowed to talk about the content or what it is, but I was still gonna hint at it because it was the weirdest lenses I've ever used, were the Cook or JDC Crystal Express lenses, which I'd never heard of before I used them. And, one of the things Logan was talking about was backup availability. Our 50 millimeter was I'd say we shot 80 to 90% of the movie on that one lens. And at one point as Logan also spoke about with older lenses and focus motors, that the focus motor basically just made the focus within, basically the gear detached from I guess it's the cam inside the lens. And so we couldn't focus it anymore. And so there were no other Crystal Express singular lenses for us to, while that was getting repaired, for us to use. So for a while, we cobbled together like a way to focus it with like a strap-on lens gear like you get for DSLRs. And then that only worked for a little while. And then we ended up having to get a lens that was close but different, which was, what was that called? CineVision 50 millimeter, but I didn't like it as much. If I did, I would have picked that one. So that was kind of a pain in the ass, I have to say, in terms of choosing to work with vintage lenses. But the reason I chose those lenses for that project was because they were so weird. Like the project itself was, the character went on a journey that got more and more surreal as the story went on, and we wanted to convey her experience of the world that she was getting involved with as getting more and more strange. So they're very distorted. They're very bendy. They have a ton of aberrations. Their lens flares are out of control. Like there were times when I didn't necessarily like what they were doing, but I was stuck with it in terms of the lens flares, where it's like, all right, well, if you can't beat it, join it. But that's something that's important to take into consideration with the older anamorphic lenses. And then the feature before that, which played heavily on my demo reel, called Entangled, was the first time I'd shot anamorphic. I chose the Kawa anamorphics. I had done a test between the Kawas and the Lomos, and I really did not like the Lomos. I did not like how the top and bottom lack of sharpness at the top, that if you try to frame someone in the close-up and their eyes were out of focus, I was like, I kind of like it when the sides are losing their sharpness and falling away, but when it's at the top and the bottom, that's actually a deal breaker for me. And I actually don't even like the Cook anamorphics any more open than like a 5.6 for that reason. On some of the longer focal lengths, that I noticed that happening. But yeah, I could go on. I'm not really sure what aspects of all of this people are interested in, so I guess I'll wrap it up and move along to questions.
So I actually have a question. You talked about beauty lighting, and when we had our phone call, you mentioned it as well. And obviously the lens you choose is very important in that, but what are the other factors? How do you create that effect?
You know what? Your question reminds me that I didn't talk about filters. I'm very big into filters. I almost never shoot without filters. Sometimes in a wide shot, or sometimes if I'm using lenses that are inherently soft, like the Crystal Express or the Speed Panchros, I might only use it on a close-up. But I'm a big fan of diffusion filters. I often use a Soft Effects half or one. I feel like they're very invisible. You don't notice, they don't necessarily add any character to the lens, like a lot of the other diffusion filters have, like, highlight flare or blooming, and the soft effects I think are very invisible, and all they do is, take the edge off. So yeah, I often like to mix lower grades of diffusion filters. So instead, like if I'm using like a, pearlescent, for example, instead of jumping up from a pearlescent half to a 1, I'll keep the pearlescent half, but then also add like a quarter black diffusion effects on top of it. So I like this sort of magic that happens between two lower grade diffusion filters interacting with each other versus just like upping the grades, where I feel like you start to see it and it starts to look more that it doesn't match the rest of the scene.
I would definitely second that as well. And I just want to mention that also, again, depends on the type of lens, how much contrast that has, plus your LUT, because sometimes the diffusion will have to be heavier, and sometimes you'll only see it in the highlights and only in the or over the whole range, and it depends on all those pieces, the lens being part of it.
Also, the Alexa is sort of has a little bit of softness built in to the imager, that the distinction between different flavors of diffusions is incredibly subtle on the Alexa, whereas when you're shooting on a red or I don't know about a Venice, but maybe like a f55 or other Sonys, you can really tell the difference between different diffusion filters, much more so than you can with the Alexa, where they all kind of look a lot more similar, which was surprising to me, having come from a strong red background. When I started doing Alexa filter tests, I was like in a DI theater on a big screen, I was like, these all look the same, like what's going on here? But back to your question about beauty lighting, one of the overlooked things that's sort of simple, I think a lot of photographers recognize this, but a lot of filmmakers don't necessarily taught this about lighting, is, the difference between B minus lighting and B plus lighting and A plus lighting has to do with where your light is in relation to the person's face. So you could move the light from here to here or from here to here and then be like, whoa, depending on the person and the architecture of their face. So I always tell that to my leading ladies that, I will be as ready as possible with your stand-in, but when you come in, I need you to sit for a second while I look at your face, and I very minorly, it only take a minute or two, but like, I don't want them to not think that I'm ready. And I also communicate this to my ADs and my directors as well, but that like every individual face, is different. And that was something that we did with the Michelle Obama piece, where I knew we only had her for at the time we were being told 30 minutes. I knew they weren't going to let me tweak the lighting for 5 or 7 minutes when she sat down. I knew if I wanted to change anything at all, that it needed to be within a 30 or 60 second window. So we built our entire lighting setup around that kind of flexibility, that I could quickly slide it a little, raise it a little, and in such a seamless way that like no one would even know that what was going on, and it wouldn't seem like we were taking up any time. So I guess that's my main trick, if you will, that I don't really hear other people speak about when you hear other DPs talk about lighting faces and beauty lighting, is how much of a difference it can make to actually look at the person's face, whether you need to get in there under the eyes, or whether it's the shape of their nose or their cheekbones or their jaw, or like whatever it is, that a small move of the positioning of your lighting can make a huge difference.
I would also say there's a lot of times where if they're just not going to give you any time, I'll have a couple bounces stashed or tubes that are off or lights dimmed down, and just have my gaffer while like final makeup's going in, just tweak a couple things and get under those if I can't move the main light. Anything to help get that as good as it can get.
You speaking about filters, I was wondering, is there, Madison, are there any plans to have filters on CineLenses?
So I think that's definitely something that should be in the works. And that actually, looking through the questions, I really liked, Kari, you mentioned, is there a listing for repair and maintenance facilities included in that? And currently there isn't, but I definitely think that's something that should be added because it would be incredibly useful. Looking at other questions in the chat that I can respond to, I think Matthew, you asked about a bulk upload lenses for sale. So in the marketplace section, we will do that for you. You just send us the info, but in 2021, we will make the whole process automatic. So that'll be a lot easier to do and you won't have to use us as a middleman to do it. And then Brienne, I think you asked, when listing lenses from rental house, do you list the different options on those lenses like uncoated or different mounts? And for mounts, yes, this appears in lens data in that section. And if the lens has different mounts, all of them will appear, all the different possible options, so you can choose from there. And then in terms of uncoated, those are cataloged separately. So for example, Master Prime, you would look Master Prime, and then below Master Prime, you'll see Master Prime uncoded. So that is done separately. And then I'm trying to see who else. So Paul, you also asked, when looking at rental houses in the US, it's in a random order, and do we have any plans to alphabetize it? We do. That'll be happening in January 2021. We're doing a whole revamp of the app, of the web. And so I think also Max, you mentioned, user experience. That's definitely something to be improved on. And some of that will be dealt with in January 2021 with that kind of app revamp. And then one other person had, I think this was Peter, you had an issue finding certain lenses on the website itself. So I thought I could do just a quick mini tutorial to kind of show you how to do that, if that's all right. So I can share my screen. And so if you go up to, so we're on my profile, for example, and if we go to lenses, it'll take us here. And I believe you were looking for example, Illy, anamorphic MKV. So you just type it in there, you hit the search button. And then you were looking specifically, you had mentioned for 24.5, mm, and you go down here. And there it is. So you can see the lens you had mentioned to me that is listed here. And then if you want to look for, credits, forum, buy, and then for rent. And if you click rent, it'll take you to the places that have that lens available. So you can see them here, Camelot in Belgium, Camera Deutz, Mark Films. So that's more or less how the lens aspect works. And we were also thinking that we can upload a few tutorials to our social media accounts to kind of take people through how to use the different sections. So if there are any parts that aren't totally clear, do let us know in the chat and we can make sure to do video tutorials. So I think those are all the questions that I had seen in the chat. Does anyone else have any questions for Jendra, for Logan? Thank you both of you for talking.
Right.
We wanted to have both of you guys here to present because CineLenses, it's ultimately all about the people that use the app. So we like to hear from you guys and talk to you.
I have
guys.
a question for Jendra. You just used the Crystal Express Joe Denton lenses, and you had said that you're a Cook Speed Panchro fan, and those are based around Cook Speed Panchros. Did you find that the look was very similar inside of the aberrations?
I mean, it explains why I like them in the first place. I mean, it's definitely to my taste in terms of the softness is something that I like, hence my love of diffusion filters, I think. But I mean, the aberrations on those lenses are so front and center. It's kind of why you pick them. Like you would only choose them if you are wanting to embrace that look in your work. I know Natasha Breyer uses them all the time. She uses them on Neon Demon and Honey Boy. They're her favorite lenses and she loved them. I found them kind of insane, but like insane was correct for that particular project. I'd love to shoot more insane projects. Like my personal taste and sensibilities, like I like edgy and weird and subcultures and, you know, but my most recent film, which was a comedy, like I said, of people in their 60s, should not be insane. It should not be insane lenses. So it's really hard to separate the aberrations of, I mean, when people would ask me like, well, what do they like? Like the first word that comes to mind is bendy. They're very, very bendy. Like the world is completely like warped. If you want that, yes, but it's really hard to compare them to anything spherical, or to remove the aberrations from the equation and how you judge or feel about them.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, and this is one of the advantages of the app, is that it's a pretty deep rabbit hole. There are a lot of lenses that are pretty special that no one knows about. I used to have a set of these 1940s Astroberlitz lenses that were totally uncoated, and they never rented, so we had to sell them, but they were just amazing. And there's all these lenses like that, and those Crystal Expresses sat on a shelf for years, or the B series Panavision anamorphics that were just under a case, and then Bill Pope walked by and was like, "What are those?" And they're like, "Well, that we can't use those." And they're like, because they hit the mirror, and they're like, "There's no more mirrors." So they just pull them out, or the Hateful Eight lenses. Like there's a lot of exploring to be done. There's a lot that's happening right now, but I would say the vast majority of DPs don't do a deep dive. So the app's a great way to start to look into that, or just go to a rental house and make them let you in the vault and just start poking around. It's fun. And it can make your work stand out as something a little unique.
You're reminding me, one of the projects I meant to talk about was I get to use some Canon Dream lenses owned by Zack Snyder. And that was like a wonderful treat. It was a very strange project. It's on my website. It's a Hanukkah Oh Hanukkah music video with Dan Fogler and Ezra Miller. And I had done a movie with Ezra, and Ezra asked me to shoot this pro bono charity project that they were doing. And we had no budget. It came together in less than 48 hours. And we didn't have much of a plan. It was basically like, we're just gonna go out to Joshua Tree and make art with our friends kind of thing. And so I just brought my own Fuji X-T3 and the Fuji lenses that I had with me, and was planning on, you know, shooting it with that. And then the night before we left, Ezra called me up and was like, I found a B camera operator. They're gonna bring some lenses and some red cameras with them. And, you know, they just want to talk to you before committing to the job. You know, they have some very specific conditions under which they're willing to do it. And I was like, okay. And he said, it's Zack Snyder. I was like, the director? It's like, and he's like, yep. He's like, he's gonna be my B camera operator. And they said yes. And I was like, okay, well, what are the conditions? And like that he's not in charge, and that he works for you. So so I call up Zack Snyder, who I'd never spoken to before, and he had these zero optic, like sort of not just rebuild, but remade Dream lenses. Like he had acquired several old moldy lenses from, like, I don't know, eBay or auctions or something, that all needed extensive repair, brought them to zero optic and said, here, take these, I don't know if it was 3-5 lenses, take the best parts out of them and like build a fresh lens out of it. So he had his own, you know, 50 millimeter Canon Dream lens. For those of you who don't know that lens, it's a 0.95 f-stop. And he had a 35 millimeter lens, which I didn't even know existed, which was from the same lens designer from the same period. It's not technically the Dream lens because the Dream lens is only the 50, but it's incredibly similar to the Dream lens in terms of the optical quality and the flares. And so I have this music video, which is like, you know, the A camera, which is all this basically handheld autofocus stuff, is shot with my Fuji X-T3. And then Zach and his son are shooting everything at a 0.95 with a, ND, it's like a welder's glass. I don't even remember, like it was beyond an ND 3.0. It was like something that had to be specifically made in order to shoot wide open on a red Monstro. And it's like, you put the two of them together in this music video and it's like a very strange combination, but like it kind of works, partly because we had a really good colorist to bridge the gap between them. But it was like this mix between, I'm taking what I have that's not costing anything, which is a total pragmatic choice. I own these lenses, this Fuji lenses that are autofocus on this camera, and the most unique lenses that you can't even find anywhere, that are only constructed by a private owner that like you would never get your hands on. And putting the two of these together on one project was a very fun experience.
Yeah, I had a quick question for both of the DPs is how do you guys feel about large format now and your lens choices and how that's changed your work? And also if with the introduction of the next ARRI camera, will the LF format still be as sought after?
I would say in regards to large format, the bigger the screen, the more it matters. Which is interesting to happen right now when we can't go to theaters. You see it on a big screen. You feel it. It makes a difference. On smaller screens, it's there, but it's just not as significant. I think it's going to have a place because every manufacturer has embraced it. But I do think, personally as a DP, I don't like being restricted on my lens choices. So I want that to be an option, but I don't want that to be the only option. So when 4K ARRI comes out, then you have all the manufacturers, all the lenses, and it can be about what's right for the story, which is, there's a reason that's #1 on the list. It should also be like number 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the list as well, because it's absolutely primary. And that Netflix show, if there had been a 4K ARRI, we tested other cameras. We just liked the color for that show. And it was a real problem. All the adapters, certain lenses didn't cover. Some lenses only covered up to like a 284. So you had to be wide open all the time. It was restrictive. I just didn't have the range. Had I wanted to use certain older lenses, I wouldn't have that option. I'm really looking to have forward to when that camera comes out and it can be entirely creative based again, and not mandated, because it's a really great tool to be able to pop someone out of a background 20 feet away in a wide shot. That's really unique. The faces that you can kind of see around, not as much as an Alexa 65, but more than a normal camera. Those are beautiful things. But they're all to be weighed on the scales of priority.
I'm with Logan on that. The only projects that I've chosen a large format camera have been projects that were very portraiture based. So I did a music video for Rhapsody that we shot on the Sony Venice and used the DNA lenses. And the reason that I chose that camera for that project was all the director's image references were all about the style of portraiture where basically the depth of field was such where like the front of the face was in focus, like the eyes and the nose, but like by the time you got to like ears and shoulders, it was falling out of focus, something that was clearly shot with the 5D wide open kind of style. So I was like, okay, if you want to elicit that kind of, bringing the person forth from the background, like Logan spoke about, then large format's the way to do that. Similarly with the Michelle Obama piece, where we had her in this really grand environment, and kind of the main shot we were going after creatively was the wide shot. And so we wanted her to not be swallowed up by this room. We wanted her, to be front and center in this very grand room, in this very wide shot. So that was part of the choice that went into that. But any of my narrative work, like I haven't been able to afford a large format camera. Like most of the independent film projects that I'm doing, it's like, you know, we're having to get a deal from a rental house. I'm like, what are you have available that you're willing to work with us on financially? And all the large format cameras are too in demand, you know, for them to be able to do that. And none of the projects that I've done that were long form was that enough of a priority for us to allocate the budget in that direction of paying more for that kind of camera. I did shoot some second unit on a TV series that was on the LF, but that wasn't my choice. That was, you know, the primary DP's choice for that project.
I would also say it's not a fully developed ecosystem in that, great, there's a couple full frame anamorphic lenses. There's no zooms. If you're shooting signatures or supremes, no zooms are going to match that yet. I tested the ones, I was excited about a few of them, and it doesn't look like a signature, and the signature zooms are coming out, but they're not here yet. So it's like, those are, I mean, there's the creative look of things, but then there's like, we're on an arm car or a crane and we have a certain amount of time, we got to get these action shots. If you don't have a zoom that matches, you're going to have a compromised image, or it's not going to feel the same, or it's not the right format. So as it develops, I think I'll be happier, but at the same time, having the other options of much broader range of lenses, especially anamorphic, of almost nothing covers the LF, the large format sensors. And it's that a lot of that is, you couldn't go to the Crystal Expresses, so you couldn't go to a lot of the great lenses that exist without serious modification or limitations. And then, but one thing I do find myself doing is I'll be wide open and then with some Indian, and then I'll go in close. And I keep myself the option of pulling that ND, stopping down, and letting it not that depth of field be a choice. It can either be that isolation that Ginger was talking about, just a single plane of focus and everything else is gone, or you can go to a 5/6 and still hold that actor and let the performance come through. So I really appreciate that choice at times in narrative situations.
I do, and about the, you know, the forthcoming Arri Super 35 4K camera, it's like, I think that's what we wanted all along. Like, I remember when I was at the LF introduction event at Paramount, and it was sort of like, oh, we're being forced into this large format world just to meet Netflix's 4K delivery. Like, everyone was joking and calling it the Netflix camera because, you know, we'd all been complaining that, you know, Netflix wouldn't let us shoot Alexa, and now we could, but now you have to use large format in order to do that. And it's like, no, please, Arri, just give us a 4K Super 35 camera. That's all most of us have all wanted all along. So I am curious how much the large format, I think, you know, obviously DPs are all curious, and we want to explore the new thing that's coming along. And so a lot of us have, you know, dipped our toe into the large format waters, but in terms of like whether it matters to us or not, like once we don't have to do that anymore in order to shoot 4K with an Arri, I wonder if it's gonna, you know, lose interest.
I think another important trend to consider is, you know, Red came out, Alexa came out. Everyone started with the sharp lenses that they had been going for film, the master primes and such. And then we weren't used to that much sharpness because we were used to film toning it down. So then everything shifts to, or a lot of projects shifted to the speed Panchros and the Kawas, K35s. And then as 7-8 years into the digital world, your eyes get used to it. And suddenly I see the master primes going off the shelves, the Leica's busier, like, and we're back to this sharp world. And in this large format environment, there's this new permutation where Masterbuilts are part of that, of vintage emulation, or like new old mix, but built modern. So those, the Blackwings, K35s are still the standard to which vintage is compared in general, but they're so expensive and so rare that they're the busiest lenses we have by far. So these new options are a really important tool to not only go for an older look, but something new, and then something that is functional, where you can get another set if you need to add a second unit. If something breaks, it can get fixed or replaced. Like, to bring that look into the modern era filmmaking, where it is still a business that needs to function, and you don't want your neck on the line because you wanted a lens that comes apart 2 days in. Doesn't mean it's not the right choice. It means that it's nice if you don't have to make that choice. Might go you. Thoughts?
Okay.
I think we lost Michael.
Oh, hi, I'm here. Sorry.
A lot of trees waving behind you.
Yeah,
Something. Can't tell.
I got distracted for a minute there. Sorry about that.
What are you running, a rental house or something?
Yeah, I'm trying to, we're in the interruption business, right?
How's Zoom from the rental house and Zoom person perspective?
It's good. One thing that you mentioned a little bit earlier, or Jendra did, was the deal, which I think I should maybe do a whole Zoom series on, is the heavy discounts the rental house has to deal with. And when
You
Jendra
can get a
said
bunch
that,
of sad rental house faces around that one.
yeah, I mean, when Jendra said that she has difficult getting a large format camera for independent projects, I think you can get them. All you have to do is ask. I say my middle name's Monty Hall. Let's make a deal.
It's been an interesting progression, evolution, devolution, however you want to call it, in terms of how that works and where the margins are on a rental house, both in terms of rental price, discounts, camera assistant gear, and everyone's trying to just make a living and do well, and it's a many faceted mess, for lack of a better term. Again, this is where that loyalty comes in, where you really hope that you take care of someone really well, they'll take care of you, and that's how small houses survive. A lot of the big houses have to play the Costco game, and that's completely valid. And it's just a competitive environment. So trying to find something special, to a special relationship as a DP and as a rental house and as an AC. It's a really interesting tightrope at this point.
It's a bit of a race to the bottom at times.
Yeah. And there's also a small market, big market, where you're in Portland, where there's not a bunch of huge houses half an hour away. But the business is different in terms of demand and volume. So it's like I said, it's a big old mess.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? I think this was a really good Lens Summit for sure. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Michael, so much for inviting us, and Jendra, thank you for joining us. It was wonderful hearing from you guys. I also wanted to let people know that I can send CineLenses email in the chat if anyone needs it. And I'm sure they can find Gendra, Logan, CineLenses, all of us on social media. Pretty easily.
We're easy.
We have some upcoming lens summits. This was going every Friday until like July. Then it sort of went every other once or twice a month Fridays. And the next one coming up is on November 20th. We're going to have Kevin from Laowa hosting from Hong Kong, which is pretty exciting. Laowa has their 24 millimeter T14 probe, which is pretty revolutionary little lens, super affordable. And I believe it was a Kickstarter project to start out with, and then it's spurred a company. So that's pretty impressive. And they're also going to be introducing some new products, which are rear anamorphic adapters like 1.33x and 1.4x for existing lenses. I don't know that much about them. But anyway, so that'll be a lot of fun. And then on December 11th, we're going to have, back by popular demand, Aeroflex with Art Adams, introducing the signature zooms, the Arri signature zooms. So that'll be a lot of fun as well. And I know that Logan shot a film for Art and Arri, and to push the capabilities of those lenses and test them out. And Logan actually set up specific situations to challenge the zooms, whether or not they would match the primes and how the zooms would perform in the film. And how long is the film?
It's about 2.5 minutes. We tried real hard to sabotage those and it didn't really work.
Great, that's exciting.
Yeah,
And then, there'll be a
nice.
host of other lens summits coming up. We'll just have to get them on the schedule.
Great. Well, fun to be a part of one. Looking forward to hearing more.
Yeah, looking forward to the next one.
Sounds great. Thanks so much. Have fun in back in Spain.
Thanks everyone that listened. Thank you, Madison. Thanks, Gendra. Thanks, Michael. Hope to see you guys in person someday.
Yeah, can't wait.
Can't wait. Quarantine. Woo.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.